afternoon. Welcome to the Missouri History Museum. My name is Melanie Adams and I serve as the Managing Director for Community Education and Events here at the museum. We are honored to host this wonderful program celebrating St. Louis authors as part of the city's 250th celebration. I would like to thank Comptroller Darlene Green and her office for thinking of the Missouri History Museum when planning this program. The museum, in partnership with dozens of community organizations organized by STL 250, worked to develop programs designed to celebrate the city's founding. As a history museum, the most natural fit for us was the creation of an exhibit, which is 250 and 250, which is located up on our first level. Instead of a traditional timeline of the city's most important events and people, the museum staff decided to select 50 people, moments, images, places, and artifacts that best represent the city over the past 250 years. It is important to remember that these 250 are not the most important, but instead the ones that best represent the wide range of diverse experiences of people in the city. From founding families such as the Chateaus to civil rights leaders such as Ms. Frankie Muse Freeman, the exhibit allows us to reminisce about fond memories and make new discoveries. My favorite 250 memory occurred just a couple of days ago when Chuck Berry Jr. was at the museum to play for Twilight Tuesday. I mentioned to him that his father's guitar was in the exhibit and did he want to see it. When we walked to the exhibit to the place that held his father's famous guitar, Mr. Berry excitedly told us about that particular guitar and how his father taught him how to play it. If that wasn't enough, he was equally ecstatic to find out that his father's guitar and description was right across from the clown suit worn by Mr. Patches, a Saturday morning icon for St. Louis children. So he was excited about not only his father, but also Mr. Patches. As he continued through the gallery, he said that he was going to make sure that the rest of his family got back to the museum to see the exhibit. It is this type of personal connection the exhibit has made time and time again as generations of families share their memories of St. Louis. The 250 exhibit will be up until February 2015, so there's still time to check it out. In addition to the 250 exhibit, the museum will be opening 2 new exhibits this fall. The first is the Louisiana Purchase, which is the first time that all of the documents associated with this historic land deal are in one place at one time. In addition to learning about the actual purchase, the exhibit will also examine life in St. Louis at this time from the perspective of the people that were already here, such as the Native Americans, African Americans, French, and Spanish. The next exhibit opening is actually a pair of exhibits. We have Utopia, Revisiting a German State in America, along with the Missouri Immigrant Experience. These exhibits look at historic immigration through the ideas of German settlers and more modern immigration stories by recent arrivals to Missouri. I encourage everyone to pick up a museum calendar on your way out to learn about the exhibits and programming taking place this fall. The museum works with dozens of community partners through the region to develop programs that reflect our mission. I would also like to encourage you to please check out our gift shop where you will find a lot of the authors that are listed in your program. You will be able to find their books there as well. So again, thank you again for spending your afternoon here at the Missouri History Museum.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bonita Cornute, and that, the woman just speaking, is Melanie Adams. She's the Managing Director of Community Education and Events here, and she's doing an outstanding job with programming and outreach to the community, and we want to thank her for hosting the event today and the History Museum. Thank you, Ms. Adams. You know, all of us probably have in us a story to tell, no matter what it is. It could be something that's fictional. It could be something from our childhood. It could be, in fact, research that we've done, travel we've done. All of that presents an opportunity to tell stories. Today we have a very distinguished group of writers. Among them, they have produced fine works received awards, been nominated and supported in all of their efforts, and today we want to present them to you. And as the title of today's event, Our Pens Are Mighty, might indicate, these individuals are prolific in terms of their ability to tell stories and write information, share information. And so we've asked that they come to you today and give you a little bit of information about what it is they've written about, why, and how they got into writing stories. Some of them you may have heard about and may have seen in different situations, but all of them bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to today's discussion. And I'd like to introduce to you our first author. Many of us have heard her on the radio and seen her on television. She is Carol Daniel. First and foremost, she will tell you that she is a mother and wife. She is married to Patrick. They are celebrating 17 years of marriage, and they are proud and very exhausted raising two boys. Doesn't take much to know that that will happen when you're raising young men today. She began her career at The Voice of St. Louis in 1995 as an anchor, reporter, and talk show host. She previously worked as a co-host of the Emmy Award-winning television show on KMOV TV, Great Day St. Louis. Then again, we know that she's actually worked as a campaign organizer, a recruiter for the U.S. Census Bureau, and even worked as a substitute teacher. She is a gifted and motivational speaker who believes in the biblical verse, "To whom much is given, much is required." Would you please welcome our first author today, Carol Daniel.
Thank you so much, Benita. And let me just first say that I am so glad that I am going first. I do consider myself a storyteller, and there are so many incredible authors from St. Louis and who are going to speak after me that it is a blessing and a joy not only to be here, but to not follow them. To not follow them whatsoever. The reason that I wanted to write a book was because I knew that people would often look at someone such as myself in a position like the one that I have, and you know, we think of overnight success stories, and it is not that. And we think of, I had friends tell me just recently that they think I have this glamorous life, and I'm thinking, first of all, you're my friends. How could you think that? You know me, you know my life. And I wanted young women to know, I wanted African American women to know, I wanted men to know that to see me is to understand the struggle. And to see me is to know that it takes a great deal of work to get where you are and yet to stay where you are. So I wrote the book in part because as a 9-year-old girl, I wasn't thinking broadcasting, I wasn't thinking television, I wasn't thinking radio, I was thinking family, husband, wife, mother. That is, as the title says, all that I ever wanted. And that's how my publisher and I came up with the title. So my goal was to inspire people to understand that no matter who you are or where you are, it's going to be difficult, but you can have what it is that you want. And it's important for me to express to people what my life has been about so that they can be inspired by it. That is my prayer, and that is why I think that all of us are here, is to inspire other people and to motivate them to do better. And so I want to read for you a pivotal time in my life, and I won't be before you long at all. It's called My Mother's Love, and this book is about my life. I can see my mother's influence in my life today. I try to clean as I am cooking, something she begged me to do as a teenager. I even put water in pans to soak them and make the cleanup easier, another habit she prayed I would pick up. But for years, there was one area where her influence did not work, the boyfriend department. To hear her tell it, I was the one she worried about the most. Pause, she has 5 children. The fact that I did well academically in high school did not change the fact that my dating life was a mess. To put it mildly, my mother did not like my boyfriend. That began the strained mother-daughter relationship that would last through my 20s. The boyfriend didn't last, but the drama stuck around for a while, as did her concern for my well-being. After high school, I followed in my brother's footsteps yet again and went to the University of Missouri-Columbia. I was immediately shocked by how unprepared I felt. I quickly began to question the 3.6 GPA I brought to the campus. The college math class with 200 other students felt like Greek. I dropped the statistics class so quickly I left skid marks in the hallway. I began to feel I never should have come to college in the first place. To make my very existence even more questionable, after missing rent, my roommates, I believe, conspired with the landlord to violate my rights and changed the locks on my apartment. No notice of eviction, just me on one side of the door and my stuff on the other. Of course, pride entered in, and I didn't tell my parents. Instead, I moved in with my then boyfriend. The icing on the awful cake was the discovery that he had a drinking problem, and I had a GPA that barely had a pulse. I decided to try to salvage my college career and transfer. I took my shame and my sense of failure with me to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. It was a kind staff member in admissions who remembered my name during my second visit, who convinced me I needed to be there. It was also the feeling that I had nowhere else to go. My mother told me that I would have to live alone. Really? And she said she would pay for my apartment. Deal. Then she said, "This is your last chance." I lived off campus and I got to know very few people. I was so lonely that first year I didn't even go to the homecoming parade, but I could hear it and see it from my apartment window as it went past. I didn't have a car, and my father would bring me groceries every 2 weeks. But soon my mother stopped him and told me, "You need to get your own husband. This one is mine," she said. I did finally make friends and grades. I may still have the letter from the university president informing me I'd made the dean's list. I began to feel less of a complete failure. When I graduated from Lincoln University, I moved to Kansas City, and I loved that city. I loved the outdoor concerts, the jazz clubs, the shops, my very own one-bedroom apartment with a balcony shaded by dozens of trees. I barbecued on the deck even when it snowed. I had dinner parties for one. I bought a waterbed and a dining room set that officially meant I was a grown-up. I worked 2 and 3 jobs at a time. I sold cable door to door. I worked retail clothing sales. I had a morning news shift on a radio station, and I was a recruiter for the Census Bureau. I sold radio and print advertising, and when I was about 26, I again thought that I was in love. He started making some radical changes in his life after joining a mosque. His charming demeanor that won me over quickly soured the deeper he got into the Nation of Islam. He became anti-establishment, which in his mind meant not working for the man. It didn't mean that for me. It didn't mean that for me at all. But our relationship quickly became dysfunctional and emotionally abusive. He didn't want me to work, although he wasn't working either. No money meant no ability to pay rent, and again, I lost an apartment, and this time, a great job. How could I let this happen? I had already struggled my way out of college. I hadn't planned to struggle again, but here I was asking myself, how does a woman smart enough to get a degree end up in a situation like this? Pride again entered in, and I didn't tell my mother what was happening. I moved in with a friend's parents, and for a month, I wondered what I would do and where I would go. I didn't call my mother, but she was calling my disconnected phone line and wondering, again, what happened to her daughter. I finally mustered the courage to call her. I explained some of the story. She simply said, "Come home." A few days later, my father drove the 4 or 5 hours to get me. He loaded my few remaining items into his truck, and I moved to Waynesville, Missouri, where I'd grown up, right outside the base. I hadn't imagined going back to my parents' home, yet my life was too precious and I had to reclaim it. I learned what I never wanted and what I wouldn't stand for. My goal now was to get back into my career and regain my sense of self. What I hadn't counted on was my mother and I repairing our relationship. I found a job at a country and western radio station, KJPW, making $9,000 a year. That was where I read the obituaries at noon every day, covered the Gulf War and its impact on families at nearby Fort Leonard Wood, and it was where my mother and I had lunch together every day for 18 months. One day she came to me and said, "I love having you here, but you know there's nothing for you here. I think you need to move on." I was stunned. Was she tired of me? I had begun to think of myself as a small town girl settling into a decent life, and I was all right with that. But my mom told me, "No, you need to fly." I knew how hard it was for her to send me back into a world that I had stumbled through. I worried her so much. She worried that I wouldn't graduate from college. She worried that I wouldn't find the right man and get married and have a family. She worried that because of my mistakes, I might not get on firm financial footing. I promised myself I would never worry her again. She tells me now that she was praying for me every night. I am so happy she's around to see my life today and to know that her prayers were answered. I don't know if I'm supposed to take questions or walk off in my tears, but I can do either. I can do either. Thank you so much.
Carol, thank you so much. No, we don't want you to walk away crying, but I will tell you that I felt the tears. I felt the emotion. Thank you so much. And we encourage all of you to visit upstairs where the authors will be available to sign their books. And you can ask Carol any questions that you might have. And she can tell you a little bit more about the life she's developed with her family and her two sons. Thank you, Carol Daniel. We want to invite now Christina Blank McConsey and Nancy Hughes to come forward. Christina? All right. Christina and Nancy are involved in the St. Louis Literacy Consortium, and they're going to talk to you a little bit, or she will talk to you a little bit about an upcoming event.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. I just walked in. I was a little late coming from another meeting, and Nancy had a health emergency today in her family. So I am here to represent the St. Louis Literary Consortium and to formally invite everyone here and everyone in St. Louis to Lit in the Lou, which is what we're hoping to be a new grassroots, widespread reading and writing book festival for the greater St. Louis region. And one of the really exciting parts of the event is that the University City Literary Arts and Letters Commission is sponsoring the first ever Tradition of Literary Excellence. And the award is going to be given to William Gass at a Friday night launch event that will be on the 5th floor of the University City Historical City Hall. So we hope that all of you will attend. We've got information on the web. There's a schedule available to see all of the artists, all of the writers. We've got 50 authors and 50 more poets. We've got about 100 people involved. And the schedule is on the St. Louis Independent Booksellers Alliance website and also on stllit.blogspot.com. And we would be happy to see all of your lovely faces at the event and tell all your friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. So we hope that you will take advantage of that invitation and participate in Lit in the Lou. Our next author is Dr. Christy Griffin. She is the founder of the Ethics Project. Dr. Christy Griffin is a retired attorney and founder of the Ethics Project. She is a leading authority on the impact of mass imprisonment and its effect on the country, particularly in the Black community. Dr. Griffin is the author of 21 Days to Joy, a daily devotional to finding joy, and Incarcerations in Black and White, the subjugation of Black America. Would you please welcome Dr. Christy Griffin?
Good afternoon. So Carol, I not only get to follow your outstanding reading, but also that voice. So yes, you were lucky to have gone first. Just a few weeks ago, the Reverend Dr. Bernice King gave a group of us a copy of her father's book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. As you can tell from the title of this seminal book, it was one of Dr. King's last before he was killed in Memphis, Tennessee, and one in which he explored how a nation would move forward in creating justice for a people. Since Dr. King's death in 1968, we have seen astronomical changes for African Americans. We've seen some reach the pinnacle of success, the presidency, the heads of Fortune 500 companies, the top position in the military, and even the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But we've also seen steps backwards. Millions of African Americans disproportionately corralled into slave labor behind bars, voting rights curtailed by wrongful and disparate convictions and voter IDs. High school dropout rates reaching as high as 60% in inner city schools, and hundreds of thousands of African Americans shackled with college debt without college degrees. We've seen the NRA arm America while disarming blacks. They've garnered the right to carry, to stalk African American black boys, and to shoot them down with impunity while we sit in silence. In the past weeks since Michael Brown's senseless killing, it has been a blessing to see so many use their talents to help us heal and to help us bring about change. There's been poetry, song, dance, paintings. We've been touched by sermons and song. We've been heard by psychologists, mended by doctors, loved by our neighbors. We've created, torn down, and marched on. It has all been an expression of our pain and our anger, and we must not stop. Just this past Monday, 9 black mothers sat on this stage, and we spoke to an audience of predominantly white mothers. We told them the stories of the talk we've had with our black sons. At the urging of Carol Daniel during an interview for KMOX Radio, I pulled together those women because somehow I felt if other women know better, they will do better. And so we prepare for Mother to Mother Part 2, which will be held here on October 13th. And I invite you to join us. We sit here today among some of St. Louis's best-known authors. We celebrate their vision and their words. And among us are those who have stories to tell, ideas to share, and poetry waiting to be read. In today's world of laptops, printers, and the internet, we no longer have to wait for an agent to open the door to a publisher. We don't have to ask permission to use the tools available to share our thoughts and words. We don't have to wait in line for someone else to define what, how, or when we will speak on the printed page. We don't need someone to deem our words worthy. Regardless of who you are, this chaotic world needs to hear your words. Yes, our pens are mighty. Whether that pen is a laptop, a paintbrush, or a mic. Whether the pen is a drumstick, a saxophone, or a book. Whether our stories are told in song, in dance, or in a rap, we have stories to tell. We have to call out the truth. Our pens are mighty, and we must make the world hear our truth. We must speak up, act out, and create the world we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. And remember, the event she spoke about, part 2, is again, Dr. Griffin, October 13th. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the local media and perhaps even on the internet. Our next speaker is B. Marcel Williams, the founder of Jewels, Inc. Mrs. Williams is a social entrepreneur who united her passions and talents to create platforms that serve youth and the community at large. The organization currently consists of 3 enrichment programs. The mission is to provide venues where urban young girls can acquire understanding of technical as well as social skills necessary to assume leadership roles through actual practice. Would you please welcome B. Marcel Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I would first like to thank you for the invitation from the Missouri History Museum to invite me to come out and share a moment with all of the amazing writers and authors of our society. My name is B. Marcel, and I am the founder of Jewels Incorporated, a national mentoring and outreach organization with international influence. We do have 10 branches in cities nationwide and communities in Ghana and Italy. I am a national youth inspirational motivator, wife, mother, and most important, child of God. It is such a delight to stand here before all of you as not only a community and youth advocate, but as someone who admires the unique skills of writers and authors and will one day soon sit amongst you. I would just like to take a moment to reflect on a couple of the honorees that are being honored today. What was not mentioned was some of their journeys, such as Dr. Christy Griffin, who graduated from Webster College with a BA in sociology, received her JD from the St. Louis University School of Law, began her private law practice as a ministry in 1984. She built one of the largest consumer bankruptcy firms here in the state of Missouri, amongst sitting upon 25 plus committees, boards, and is also the founder of multiple organizations and platforms that encourage our community to do better. Jabari Asim, he's an author, a poet, a playwright, associate professor of writing, literature, and publishing at Emerson College in Boston, Massachusetts. Editor-in-chief of the Crisis magazine, a journal of politics, ideas, and culture published by the NAACP and founded by the historian and social activist W.E.B. Du Bois in 1910. Along a list of opportunities and milestones that he also has gone through. Leah Beth LaFleur, she's a St. Louis native, BA in Communications from Stevens College, and she became one of the youngest members of the Stevens College Board of Trustees, and only the second African American to be appointed to the board in the college's history. She worked at Nickelodeon and Uptown Entertainment and was associate producer of the critically acclaimed Fox TV drama New York Undercover. She was also profiled, in essence, in a feature entitled What 35 Looks Like, the magazine's monumental 35th anniversary issue, as one of the top 25 to watch under 25. Dick Gregory, American comedian, social activist, social critic, writer, conspiracy theorist, and entrepreneur. His performance skills conveyed to both white and black audiences his political messages and civil rights. He was a poor student who excelled at running and was aided by teachers at Sumner High School. Miss Frankie Muse Freeman, the Honorable, she was a Howard University alumni and sat on the Board of Trustees. She was an American civil rights attorney, the first woman to be appointed to the United States Commission of Civil Rights between 1964 and 1979, a federal fact-finding body that investigates complaints alleging discrimination. Julius Hunter received his greatest fame as a TV reporter and anchorman from 1970 to 2002, was a teacher, civic leader, reporter, historian, newspaper columnist, radio talk show host, and the list goes on, as well as others such as Sheila Banks, Robert Butler, and Curtis Centerfield. And I'm saying all of this to say that they've had a journey, a milestone. They've had people to train them up along the way. You don't get to be a Frankie Freeman or a Julius Hunter or a Christy Griffin without having others to back you up and to support you along the way. If you all could please, really quick, just take a moment to applaud all of the honorees, the top 50 that we have of our writers and authors here today. So it has been quite the journey for all of them to get to where they are. We know that our journeys are still on course, and we are not finished yet. And as we all know, we did not get here today by ourselves. We have had a village, just as they have had a village, and a team around us pushing us to keep going, keep growing, keep reading, keep writing. Journal your day today. Write your book report. Write that short story for class. Write that article for your school newspaper. Get on the journalism team for the yearbook. Submit your outline for your book. Write your book. Write another book, and another book. Unfortunately, for our youth today in St. Louis, they do not have anyone to push them to write, yet alone to read. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, a division of the U.S. Department of Education, children who are read to at home enjoy substantial advantage over children who are not. They can count to 20 or higher than those who were not. They can write their own names. They can read or pretend to read. According to the literacy fast facts from the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, literacy is defined as using printed and written information to function in society, to achieve one's goals, and to develop one's knowledge and potential. Kids who do not read proficiently by the 4th grade are 4 times likely to drop out of school. So some literacy statistics real quick worldwide. According to UNICEF Children's Rights and Emergency Relief Funds, nearly 1 billion people will enter the 21st century unable to read a book or sign their names, and 2/3 of them are women. As of 2011, America was the only free market organization for economic cooperation and development country where the current generation was less educated than the previous. 85% of juveniles who interface with the juvenile court system are functionally illiterate. More than 60% of all prison inmates are illiterate. Penal institutions' records show that inmates have a 16% chance of returning to prison if they receive literacy help, as opposed to the 70% who receive no help. Illiteracy and crime are closely related. If a child cannot make it out of the 3rd grade, entering into the 4th grade, able to read on a minimal of an average level, their likelihood of going to jail increases. So that looks like 2 out of every 3 students. A moment ago, I took you on a reflection of some of our honorees here today. They've had major milestones of some of the honorees that have gotten here and how they've gotten here today, which have assisted in their journey on helping them become who they are. Unfortunately, for many of our youth, they will not make it to their true divine destiny. For instance, a young girl named Allison, known to her friends as Allie. a young girl. Her mom died when she was 5. She got molested. She started getting molested at the age of 8 until she was about 14 years old. At the age of 14, she ran away from home. She dropped out of high school. Her reading level was only at a 6th grade level. She hooked up with a boyfriend who then became her pimp that beat her continuously. By 15, she was a complete crack addict with over 20 felonies. Just before turning 16, she decided to give her life to Christ. Her new village of supporters were beginning to take shape in her life and influence her and encourage her to go back to school, to get a higher education, to pick up a book and read it. But unfortunately, a few months after her 16th birthday, she died of an overdose on Friday, September 26, 2014. Unfortunately, we cannot save them all, but we can play our parts and do our best. While I stand here and I do salute Jabari, Mary Jo, Sheila, Burton, Heather, Robert, Michael, CJ, David, Jeannie, Anita, Amanda, Gerald, Kathleen, Jonathan, Frankie, William, Dick, Dr. Christy, Ellie, Laurel, Gerald Horn, A.E. Hotchner, Julius, Michael Kahn, Sissy, Leah Beth, Shirley, Patricia, Terry, Kimberly, Jade, Nikki, Charlotte, Ridley, Carl, Miriam, Eugene, Risa, Howard, I'm pronouncing her name wrong, my apologies, Charles, Rabbi Mark Shook, Curtis, Pat Lorraine, Charles, Quincy, Francil, Dr. John, and Sylvia. We must all come together collectively and do. There should never be any child left behind, but in a government program is not needed to tell us that. I am here to tell you today, and this is something that someone once told me before, that all of our youth need, all of our children's need is love and an education. So it's time for us to pick it up, and not just a pen, but our community and our youth. If we all continue to play our part and take a child under our wing that is not our own and mentor them in the literacy field, then we can collectively cut the rate of our youth that enter into the justice system daily. Literacy is learned. Illiteracy is passed along by parents who cannot read or write. Many of our youth have a huge disadvantage on their hands coming from homes where they receive no parental or home life support on a daily basis. According to the U.S. Department of Education, where parent involvement is low, the classroom mean average reading score is 46 points below the national average. 1 child in 4 grows up not knowing how to read. 43% of adults at level 1 literacy skills live in poverty compared to only 4% of those at level 5. My challenge to everyone in this room today, it doesn't matter your age at all. There's a 13-year-old young published writer that I had the opportunity to meet and sit next to in the audience, so I challenge you as well. Return to your homes today and share your honors, your awards, and your trophies with a young child or student, and encourage them to do better than you. Encourage them to read. Report back to you within a reasonable time frame on what they read. Encourage them to write and journal daily and share with you their thoughts. We all live extremely busy lives, especially in today's society, which it would seem as if it's likely for us to find any downtime at all. But challenge yourself to give up that time and serve a child that comes home to an empty house. Serve a child whose parents are a part of the illiteracy statistics that I mentioned before. Serve a child who does not know how to read. Serve a child who does not know how to write. If you have a literacy program, and I applaud the program that is coming to St. Louis, Lit in the Lou, if you have that program, I thank you so much for the work that you are doing in that field. But always remember, there is more to be done. Like I said before, love and education is what our youth today in St. Louis need. Continue to write the books that inspire us all. Continue to write the books that stretch our imagination, for a mind stretch can never go back to its original size. Continue to write the books that will make us think about what is really going on today in St. Louis and around the world. Continue to write, and as you write, look to your right. And ask the child you have now begun to mentor what they are writing about, because we all know that our pens are mighty. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel Williams. B. Marcel Williams, she is the founder of Jules Inc., and of course, you have all been challenged. There are things there that each of us can do to make a difference in the lives of young people in this community. Our next speaker is another of the top 50 authors recognized here at the History Museum. She is Terry Mulligan, and Terry grew up in Harlem. She attended both public and private schools, completing her education at CCNY, earning an MA in English. She has studied writing at Washington University's Summer Writers Institute and the Iowa Writing Festival. And until 2012, she taught writing at St. Louis Community College. Mulligan is a member of the Harlem Arts Alliance, the St. Louis Publishers Association, and she volunteers with several organizations that work to improve education for children in underserved schools. Her first book, Sugar Hill, Where the Sun Rose in Harlem, won a 2012 First Place IPPY Award for Multicultural Nonfiction. In 2013, Sugar Hill won first place in the Benjamin Franklin Awards for autobiography, memoir, and her novel, Afterlife in Harlem, will be published this fall. Would you please welcome Terry Mulligan?
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and as Carol said, I'm really honored to be here with some of these names on this list, and I'm not first, so I will do my best here. I already lost my sheet that I wrote my summary on, but I've said this, had this talk so many times, I pretty much know what I want to say. Well, not so many times, I'm not bragging, believe me. I wrote this book, my book that Melanie, and I want to thank Melanie particularly, asked me to speak briefly today. I wrote it because I moved to St. Louis. I moved here in the 70s from Harlem, and I don't usually mention this, but I was marrying a white man. We're still married 43 years later, and it was quite a shocking, well, not shocking, it was quite a revolutionary thing in my family for me to be moving to the South. That's, you know, at that time in history. And when I got here, I mean, people were generally quite nice, but there was a lot of others weren't. But what I noticed that kind of got me this idea about the book was that no matter who they were, they couldn't believe I was from Harlem. I mean, Harlem had such a bad reputation, but it was a very monolithic view. And Harlem is an historic community that, like any great city, has much to offer, and not just gangs and drugs and crime, which it was suffering from then. And I will read just a paragraph that kind of explains why I wrote this book. The idea came, and my idea was to tell the world about Sugar Hill, Harlem in particular, a scenic 400-year-old chunk of prime New York City real estate that sits on a bluff atop an island empire. That scrappy community that I loved remained as large a character in my life as the real characters who helped make me the woman I had become. You don't know what you have until you lose it, until it's no longer there. And I just, you know, lived in New York, but there was so much I missed and didn't appreciate. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have spent a lot of time, many, many years writing this book. I put it away and it finally came out a couple years ago, kind of documenting history, the history of Harlem. And some of you have probably been there lately. It is not the place I write about, and much of the history has been lost. Some young people have come to my talks and said they're glad to hear, or they've come because they want to hear what it was like in the old days. And it really is, so much of it is lost. But briefly, what I talk about in the book is
when I talk about the beauty of the neighborhood, we sit on the bluff, literally. It's one of the highest points in Manhattan. Many people go to New York City and they don't get north of 96th Street. Again, that's changing because Harlem is quite the place now. I was just reading something, I get these Google alerts on my phone every morning. There was a $2.83 million home, brownstone, just around the corner from where we lived. We actually lived in an apartment, but the brownstones were sprinkled in the apartment buildings. They're condos that are going for several $1,000,000. When I left New York City, you could buy one of those buildings for $25,000, even the ones that weren't a wreck. That's how much it's changed. There's no place else to go, so the developers and everybody is moving up there, and that's kind of an issue because you know what happens when a community gets gentrified. A lot of the old ways get lost. But my book talks about the years of the Great Migration when so many people were living the South. My grandmother came up in the 30s. The numbers racket was kind of an endemic, historic thing in Harlem. I think they have the numbers here too, but it wasn't quite as big. And it was quite entertaining. It was all the men, and I don't care who they were, the teachers, the ministers, the preachers, and doctors and lawyers. If they didn't play it, their sons or their wives played it. It was just kind of really a cultural thing in Harlem. Religion has always been big. The evangelists were in their heyday then. Reverend Ike, Sweet Daddy Grace, Father Divine. And the Catholic Church moved into Harlem, and I was sent to the Catholic Church, and that was really quite an interesting experience. I talk about the nuns had a very hard time with all the Irish moving out, although I still went to school with white kids in the 50s, Irish and Polish kids. But they were leaving the community, so it was a big change for the church, and it wasn't always pleasant. But I talk about that. The Apollo was a big part of my life. I was privileged to go every Thursday with my stepfather for quite a few years. He worked nights, my mom worked days, and I saw, starting with some of the big bands, which I didn't like, and all the great Nina Simone and Ella Fitzgerald, Harry Belafonte, Pearl Bailey, Sarah Vaughan, and then of course the doo-wop groups came in when I was still pretty young, about 12. So I really was walking through history every Thursday. And someone asked me, I'm sure you didn't know what you had, and I said I really did. I mean, my friends didn't get to go to the Apollo every Thursday. It was like dressing up in your Sunday best. Everybody dressed up for everything back then, but dressing up in your Sunday best, getting your hair all curled, and going to see these just amazing people. They couldn't play anywhere else yet. There was no black entertainment on TV. I think Nat King Cole was maybe the first one on Ed Sullivan. And this is where they all just clamored to come. There were other venues in the South when they did the circuit in the South, but New York and the Harlem Apollo Theater was the place to be. And to this day, I cherish that. This was during the Civil Rights era. All the civil rights leaders were pretty much based in Harlem because it was safe there. They couldn't do what they needed to do in the South, although the planning was all for the South. Stokely Carmichael, and I used to volunteer, and I'll tell you why I did that in a minute, at the Corps office, writing posters for the Children's March in Washington. That was the first Civil Rights March, I think. Then there's a lot about my family. It's not a history book per se, it's really very funny about characters, and like the night our cat went crazy and tried to kill us. And that's not funny, but I mean, it's kind of funny. It wasn't funny then. So don't think it's all just, like labeling, going, step-by-step history. And then I write about Black society. That was really a sore point with me because I could never be accepted in Black society. And that's as I got older, those are the boys I liked. A lot of the kids on my block were not going to college, weren't interested in school, beginning to drop out. And, some of the kids from the society families, and we definitely weren't. society were the kids that I was more interested in, but I wasn't invited to their parties. I wasn't part of their group, and anyway, that's funny, that stuff. I use it with a light touch. My dad was a Cotton Club dancer. By the time I was born, a lot of the men on the line were being drafted, had been drafted. So the Cotton Club had broken up. It's back, but it's a whole new thing. He was dancing when Lena Horne was only 16. She was the female singer. She used to travel with her mother. And that was all pretty much in the 30s before I was born, but I really didn't know that. Nobody told you anything. It's one reason it took me so long to write this book. Now everyone is telling you everything on Facebook and Twitter or whatever, but I had to, people, when they start dying, and I could practically catch them on their deathbeds, is when they tell me things, even, stuff in the South. I think it had been such a hard time for them. There'd been so many humiliations or difficult experiences that they wouldn't tell me about my family in the South, and as a consequence, most of that is lost. So I don't have that, but my children will have, my history with this book. And I end the book at the school I went to. It's a New Lincoln school. It was a private school. I got a scholarship, and it was an extraordinary place, and it really changed my life. And it's one reason that living in a city like St. Louis that's so racially divided is really, really terrible. Because this school was a pioneering school in so many ways. Most of the school was Jewish, but they were determined. A lot of the parents who kind of founded the school had been blacklisted during the McCarthy era. They were show business people. My best friend, she was a new girl in 7th grade, was Susan Lesser, because she had just moved from Hollywood with her family because her dad had a new play on Broadway called The Most Happy Fella. He had done Guys and Dolls. I didn't know much about Broadway then, or even who some of these people were. But it was a very warm, embracing, and I had actually had quite a bit of interaction with people of another race. My grandmother is Irish. The kids in my elementary school were, we had mixed classes, and we had, lots of merchants in the community, and it's New York, even though you couldn't get an apartment on Fifth Avenue if you looked like me, but still, it was pretty much a city where you were exposed to many different kinds of people. And I told you I volunteered at the Corps office. This is when Jews and blacks were very, very simpatico. And my white friends really taught me how to give back to the civil rights era, to participate in civil rights. The kids on my block were not going down south and, riding. It was a lot of the white kids who were the older brothers and sisters of my classmates. In fact, our fellow school, Mickey Schwerner, was one of the boys who went to Walden School, which was just a couple about a mile away from our school. And he was one of the boys who was killed in Meridian, Mississippi with Cheney and I forget the third boy's name. But that was the kind of high school experience I had. So when I came here, I realized St. Louis was different, and I wrote this book. And I have just finished another book that hopefully will come out next month. We're having a little trouble with some printers. And that is also set in Harlem. It's called Afterlife in Harlem. And this is really more of a salute to Harlem's colonial past, because it's kind of a fantasy. It's historical fiction. And Bill Clinton meets the ghost of Alexander Hamilton, and I grew up across the street from his house, Hamilton's house. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mulligan. Again, it is helpful to hear of that history. Some of my reading in high school about the Harlem Renaissance was truly enlightening and a great inspiration to me. So to hear from someone who's actually lived there and was raised there, I think is important that we take advantage of her knowledge and her expertise. Our next speaker is Dr. Priscilla Dowden White. She is, very gifted, having recently returned from South Africa. She is an associate professor of history at the University of Missouri, where she currently serves as undergraduate advisor and teaches a variety of courses on African American history, United States history since 1865, and the history of St. Louis. Dr. White holds a BA in history from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, a MPS in Africana Studies from Cornell University, and a PhD in history from Indiana University. Again, her scholarly interests include social welfare and civic activism among African Americans during the interwar period of World War I and World War II. Dr. Dowden White is the author of the published book entitled Groping Toward Democracy, African American Social Welfare Reform in St. Louis, 1910 to 1949. Would you please welcome Dr. Priscilla Dowden White.
Thank you so much, Benita, for that warm introduction. I'm delighted, first of all, to see that what appeared to be very soft light falling down here is much brighter than it looked from where I was sitting out there, because my eyes are not the best, but I can read what is in front of me. It is indeed a great honor to be a part of this amazing event. I'd like to thank everyone who was associated with putting this event together and sponsoring it. Comptroller Darlene Green in particular, Melanie Adams. I want to give a special shout out to Melanie Streeper, whom I felt like I knew before we met for the first time today because of our back and forth emails and telephone calls, and her patience that she illustrated in trying to get me to understand what this event was about. When she asked me to speak on Maya Angelou's influence on my life and my work as a writer, and that's basically all she said. That's what we want to do. Someone had recommended you for this. Someone had seen you on television when Maya Angelou passed, and you were giving an interview, and that's what you're being asked to speak on. And my first thought was, well, that's not the topic of my book, and Ferguson happened, and I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about Ferguson. And it took a minute for me to really understand what this event was about and why I had been asked to speak on Maya Angelou. It's not that I did not think about the fact that Maya Angelou had been such a great influence on my life, but as I began to think about what it is that I would say to you today, I was reminded once again of just how great of an influence she had made on my life, an impact that she had made on my life. I grew up, I was born and reared in St. Louis City and in North St. Louis, and some of my family came from South St. Louis, Hickory and Streets, LaSalle, around in that area. And when I was a little girl, I remembered hearing the name Maya Angelou associated with the first in her series of autobiographical works, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it was shortly after the book had been published, because my mother and my grandmother were so excited. And I remembered seeing the book lying in my grandmother's bedroom on her dresser. It's actually one of the first books that I remember seeing that was an adult book. And it's interesting because I think I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is perhaps her most famous and most influential book. But for me, the book that made the greatest impact on me personally was her book, The Heart of a Woman. And The Heart of a Woman begins when Maya is around 19 years old. And I did not realize that until after she died, when I went back to look at the book. But that book saved my life when I was 19 years old. I was pregnant out of wedlock with my daughter, and my mother and I went through a period in our relationship of great difficulty. And that book literally saved my life. Now, later on, when I went off to graduate school to work on my master's degree at Cornell, I chose for a topic for my thesis Joe Louis, the boxer, and I looked at him as a culture hero in Black America. And I thought about how Maya Angelou influenced me even in the research of that book, of that thesis, that unpublished thesis. There is a passage that I used from Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, from chapter 19, and that chapter is called Champion of the World. I'm sure that some of you remember the passage that I'm going to read to you from that chapter. I'm just going to read a brief excerpt from it. But the reason why I included this in my master's thesis on Joe Louis is because she wrote about what it was like in Arkansas when she was a little girl in this rural environment, when you listened and watched sports on a radio, and you had to use your imagination as you listened to what the announcers were saying. And Maya Angelou is one of those writers, I don't say was because she's still with us, is one of those writers who paints a picture like no one else can paint a picture. And I will never forget that passage in chapter 19 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, where she's remembering her childhood, and she tells us how she and her older brother Bailey were growing up in this town in Arkansas. The center of their lives was their grandmother and their Uncle Willie's store, a gathering place for the African American community. And on the night that the story takes place, Joe Louis, as he was referred to as the Brown Bomber, the hero of his people by this time, he is defending his heavyweight boxing title against a white contender by the name of Primo Carnera, who was an Italian boxer. Now, there are people in this room who remember Joe Louis. Not many of us could actually say we remember Joe Louis, but Joe Louis's fights took on proportions way outside of the sport arena. And for me, as a scholar, I was able to study the interplay between sport and society. And I'd just like to read to you from this passage where Maya Angelou is describing what it was like to be in this country store in Arkansas. Everyone is gathered around the radio listening to this fight. I ain't worried about this fight. Joe's gonna whip that cracker like it's open season. He gonna whip him till that white boy call him mama. At last, the talking finished, and the string-along songs about razor blades were over, and the fight began. A quick jab to the head. In the store, the crowd grunted. A left to the head and a right and another left. One of the listeners crackled like a hen and was quieted. They're in a clinch. Lewis is trying to fight his way out. Some bitter comedian on the porch said, "That white man don't mind hugging that end now, I bet you." The referee is moving in to break them up, but Lewis finally pushed the contender away, and it's an uppercut to the chin. The contender is hanging on. Now he's backing away. Lewis catches him with a short left jab to the jaw. As I pushed my way into the store, I wondered if the announcer gave any thought to the fact that he was addressing as quote unquote, ladies and gentlemen, all the Negroes around the world who sat sweating and praying, glued to their master's voice. He's got Lewis against the ropes, and now it's a left to the body and a right to the ribs, another right to the body. It looks like it was low. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the referee is signaling, but the contender keeps raining the blows on Lewis. It's another to the body, and it looks like Lewis is going down. My race groaned. It was our people falling. It was another lynching, yet another black man hanging on a tree. One more woman ambushed and raped. A black boy whipped and maimed. It was hounds on the trail of a man running through slimy swamps. It was a white woman slapping her maid for being forgetful. The men in the store stood away from the walls and at attention. Women greedily clutched the babes on their laps, while on the porch, the shufflings and smiles, flirtings and pinchings of a few minutes before were gone. This might be the end of the world. If Joe lost, we were back in slavery and beyond help. It would all be true. The accusations that we were lower types of human beings, only a little higher than apes. True that we were stupid and ugly and lazy and dirty and unlucky, and worst of all, that God himself hated us and ordained us to be the hewers of wood and drawers of water forever and ever, world without end. We didn't breathe. We didn't hope. We waited. He's off the ropes, ladies and gentlemen. He's moving toward the corner of the ring. There was no time to be relieved. The worst might still happen. And now it looks like Joe is mad. He's caught Camara with a left hook to the head and a right to the head. It's a left jab to the body and another left to the head. There's a left cross and a right to the head. The contender's right eye is bleeding, and he can't seem to keep his block up. Lewis is penetrating every block. The referee is moving in, but Lewis sends a left to the body, and it's an uppercut to the chin, and the contender is dropping. He's on the canvas, ladies and gentlemen. Babes slid to the floor as women stood up and men leaned toward the radio. Here's the referee. He's counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is the contender trying to get up again? All the men in the store shouted, no. 8, 9, 10. There were a few sounds from the audience, but they seemed to be holding themselves in against tremendous pressure. The fight is all over, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the microphone over to the referee. Here he is. He's got the brown bomber's hand. He's holding it up. Here he is. Then the voice, husky and familiar, came to wash over us. The winner and still heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis, champion of the world. a black boy, some black mother's son. He was the strongest man in the world. People drank Coca-Colas like Ambrosia and ate candy bars like Christmas. Some of the men went behind the store and poured white lightning in their soft drink bottles, and a few of the bigger boys followed them. Those who were not chased away came back, blowing their breath in front of themselves like proud smokers. It would take an hour or more before the people would leave the store and head for home. Those who lived too far had made arrangements to stay in town. It wouldn't be fit for a black man and his family to be caught on a lonely country road on a night when Joe Louis had proved that we were the strongest people in the world. The next time I really thought about Maya Angelou's influence on me as a scholar was when I was working on my PhD dissertation that would eventually become my book, Groping Toward Democracy. And I used another passage that's not as long as this passage, another passage in my book from Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because it painted a particular picture of St. Louis that I wanted to capture. And as you know, historians deal with primary source material in addition to secondary source material. And I was thinking about what historians do when Arthur Terry Milligan made a couple of comments about not being a historian. And you know, some of what we do is perceived to be boring, if not boring itself. And one of the things that you must do as a historian is to paint pictures. And so when I was working on the political piece of my study, while I was attempting to give a picture of politics in St. Louis in the 1930s, politics that resulted in the building of Homer G. Phillips Hospital, I thought back to a passage again from Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And this is the passage that I would like to end my comments today and leave you with. One of the things that drew me to this passage is what Maya Angelou does. I rarely use the word inclusive, but Maya is so inclusive in her writing in a particular way that I needed her to be. Because sometimes when we tell the stories, historians tell the stories, in this particular case, about politics, you know, we give this sanitized version, and you would just think that it was elite and middle-class people who were making things happen in communities. Well, this passage reminded me, and I think it will remind others, that that is not the case. She says, Grandma Baxter was a quadroon or an octoroon, or in any case, she was nearly white. She had been raised by a German family in Cairo, Illinois, and had come to St. Louis at the turn of the century to study nursing. While she was working at Homer G. Phillips Hospital, she met and married Grandfather Baxter. She was white, having no features that could even loosely be called Negroid, and he was black. While she spoke with a throaty German accent until her death, he had the choppy, spouting speech of the West Indians. We met the numbers runners, gamblers, lottery takers, and whiskey salesmen, not only in the loud streets, but in our orderly living room as well. They were often there when we returned from school, sitting with hats in their hands, as we had done upon our arrival in the big city. They waited silently for Grandma Baxter. Her white skin and the pince nez that she dramatically took from her nose and let hang free on a chain pinned to her dress were factors that brought her a great deal of respect. Moreover, the reputation of her 6 mean children and the fact that she had a precinct captain compounded her power and gave her the leverage to deal with even the lowest crook without fear. She had pull with the police department, so the men in their flashy suits and fleshy scars sat like church-like decorum and waited to ask favors from her. If grandmother raised the heat off the gambling parlors or said the word that reduced the bail of a friend waiting in jail, they knew what would be expected of them. Come election, they were to bring in the votes from their neighborhood. She most often got them leniency, and they always brought in the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We certainly appreciate your study, Dr. Priscilla Dowden-White, UMSL Professor of History. Our next speaker is Dr. John Wright. He is an author and retired educator. He writes books alongside his wife, Sylvia A. Wright, and she is also one of our top 50 authors. Dr. Wright, of course, is a top 50 author because of the work that he has done on the history of St. Louis. He's actually put together a couple of pieces, a couple of books, and all of it brings greater light to the history of African Americans in the city of St. Louis. So would you please welcome our top 50 author, Dr. John Wright. Watch your step, Dr. Wright. It's a little bit of a comfort.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to talk too long. I see some of y'all walking out here, and I don't want to have an empty room. I notice I'm the only male on the list. Well, how did that happen? Well, you know, I'd like to say my success, I have to give a lot of credit to my wife. We got married when I was still in school. And I wasn't one for doing a lot of writing and studying, but the last semester when we were married in school, I needed 21 hours to get out. And the dean said, "You're not the quality student who can do 21 hours. And as I told him, I can't come back. So I took 21 hours, worked 25 hours, and graduated. Since we've been married, between us, we've both gotten 3 degrees. And so, but I owe a lot to her because of that motivation. You know, you write material, but you need someone to always look it over and say, you're on target, you're off target. So many times when I'm off focus, she brings me back. So it's a pleasure to be here with so many people whom I've known for a long time, who've done great work around the city. I was thinking about what I've done. I consider myself maybe a collector of history. And a lot of my information and inspirations come from many I call keepers of the flame. In the black community, there are individuals who collect history, make sure it doesn't die, always willing to pass it on. And what I've done is taken a lot of that material from those out in the community who've kept history. I was inspired to get involved with history from my high school teacher, who taught me that blacks had a lot to offer this community and did to the world. And when I became an educator, I sort of saw so much that was missing in our textbooks. I feel if we don't give youngsters a reason to dream, it's hard to get them in education. We have to inspire them. As was said earlier, the prison population is designed so that if you don't have a 3rd grade education and begin to count the numbers and begin how many prisons they're going to build. It's the new plantation. And kids who don't dream find themselves dropping out of school. And I don't feel that youngsters who reach 8th grade who can't read still can't read. I believe that they're inspired, they can achieve. My wife and I did a book last year on extraordinary Black Americans, Missourians, and it talks about individuals who have achieved in spite of the odds. And if you have a dream and a vision and see others who've done that, then you begin to point and work towards that dream. I feel a lot of violence in our community is because individuals who don't like themselves, it's hard to like other people. And if we teach kids to love themselves and visualize their success, they can go out and be productive citizens because they have that dream. I've done, a lot of my books have pictures in them. I find people like to see family members, people they've seen, neighborhoods they've grown up in. One of the first books I did was on the Kinloch community. And I started out hating to write. I mean, people said, "You're right." I said, "I'm just doing something." I really don't like to write. When I had a chance to do my thesis, I did 3 extra hours rather than write. When I got to my dissertation, I had all my classwork finished. It says, "Time to do your dissertation." It took me 5 years. You see? And my advisor said, "When you gonna finish?" We were going through a school desegregation. I kept saying, "I'm in the court, man. I've got this stuff to do." And so he finally said, "This is your last one." And so I finished it. And I did it on the desegregation of the all-black schools in St. Louis County before 1954. After 1954, there were 11 school districts. I traveled around the county to those school districts. I met individuals who all had fascinating stories to tell of their life and the community. I took pictures of those communities, and I built with real respect. And then I went out to Kinloch, and they told me about the glorious history they had there. And so I get people who read those books on Kinloch, the Ville, disappearing Black communities, and they see those stories of communities of life that have been omitted from most books. And it inspires them. That's my grandmother, that's my grandfather, my uncle told me about this. And many of those books have been used for research, and I have people calling all the time to use material, to ask for more material. We have a great history in the African American community, not only in St. Louis, in the United States, but worldwide. It's omitted. And I fight to make sure we have more inclusive history. When I work with students at the university, I tell them about the history that's been omitted from books. And one of the things we talk about is the Statue of Liberty. That was supposed to have been a Black woman. But most people don't realize that. And there are so many things that we just don't know about. We talk about St. Louis, the brutal history we had in the beginning of the city. We burned a man alive downtown St. Louis. We had 4 individuals, we hung them and cut their heads off and put them in a drugstore window. And we've come a long ways in St. Louis. We still got a long ways to go, but it's only because we've had people who continue to push and won't let us sleep and won't let us rest. And we have to, if we want a better society. And we can do that through history and through information. And those of us who have history, share it with your family. Each time someone dies, another page of history is lost. So those of you who have family members at home, talk with them while they're still living. Collect the pictures. Write on the back who they are. Because once they're gone, I've got a stack of pictures at home now. I don't know who they are. My parents died before I was able to write on who those individuals were. Collect those pictures. Write on them. Share that information with your kids. I remember the stories my mother told me about the South. I have a cousin now, we communicate back and forth. Those stories, we're planning on trying to do something with about our family, all the things that happened. The first thing I had, my son gave me something that I hadn't heard too much about. It was gator babies. It was a story of whites who used to kidnap African American babies, tie ropes around them, leave them in the swamps for the alligators. If you see the postcards, if you go back and look at postcards, you see many African American babies in the mouth of alligators. Those are things we don't talk about in history, but we need to talk about in history. We don't talk about the concentration of the Japanese during the war, taking all their property away. We don't talk about the way we've treated our Chinese early citizens who helped build the railroad. We don't talk about how we gave smallpox blankets to our Native Americans. We've got to learn the history for this country and all those who helped make this country if we want to ever heal and become one. And it's up to those of us who storytellers to tell the story so that they never die, but we keep them alive. And I thank you for inviting me here today. And I see my classmate here, Shirley, who's a great poet here. And we started out in grade school together, and she's been writing ever since, going all over the world, writing poetry, being on TV and radio, and every place I see Shirley, she's doing great things. And I thank you for having me here today, and I appreciate your allowing me to share a few words with you. Thank you.
Dr. Wright, again, is one of the top 50 authors that have been identified by the Comptroller's Office and the History Museum. And we would like to ask any of the top 50 authors that are here in the room, would you please come to the stage so that you might be recognized, receive a certificate and a photo.